Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett
Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, I've got Dr. Will Haas with me. Dr. Will Haas, how you doing?
Fantastic. Excited to be
Awesome. Good. How is Charlotte, North Carolina treating you today?
Kind of getting into that nice period where it's fall. You know, in the South here, we occasionally get 4 seasons, but we're getting a nice little fall. It's cool, so I'm loving it right now.
It's been hot here, man. It's been like in the high 80s in mid-October. It's nuts. I was at my son's golf tournament on Monday and shorts and a golf shirt and sweating to death. I'm like, this should not be happening.
You get those breakthrough days, right? Still get we have one of those days, but then it's cool, crisp in the morning and in the evening, which I love. Yes,
I agree. Put on a nice little hoodie at night or something to hang out. So, well, you are the founder and CEO of VYVE Wellness. You're a board-certified integrative medicine physician. And this is what I like about the introduction here is like, what if you could feel 20 years younger in just 90 days, right? That's kind of one of the things I know you guys are doing, but you're making that possible for high performers nationwide, board-certified integrative medicine physician and founder, like I said, of VYVE Wellness. You specialize in cellular optimization, helping executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals unlock more energy, sharper focus, and renewed vitality. We like that. But before we get started, man, what has helped make you the man you are today?
Definitely practice what you preach. Right? So kind of take your own medicine. So it kind of starts with the foundations, right? You know, despite juggling and balancing, creating a new business, you know, a bit of a physician entrepreneur. So I actually have a few other smaller businesses, although VYVE is kind of one of the primary focuses, but it's making sure you make time and space for the essentials, right? So getting adequate restorative sleep, making sure you're fueling yourself with a, whole plant-based, nutrition, taking key supplements where you need to, taking that time to recharge, reset. Although I know as physicians, even or entrepreneurs, even myself, is maybe a little guilty of not spending enough time creating that recharge space. But it starts with those foundations, so you could show up every day at 110%. And if you're not taking the time to address those foundational things, it's going to catch up to you.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about this. Everybody talks about now, it's kind of a buzzword, if you will, is longevity, right? And I say that a lot on this podcast. And my goal is to play golf when I'm 100 years old. And so, and I will say, being active is important because I'm just going to be very, humbled here. Is I got beat. My wife and I played in a pickleball tournament this weekend, and it was a 72-year-old and an 81-year-old females that we got beat by, and. Here I am thinking, I'm 47. I'm pretty athletic. We're gonna smoke these ladies, babe. And the 81-year-old was like just doinking it right by me. I'm like, this is not good. So I think you got to stay active. Number one, that was my point. But the longevity, the buzzword. Just talk about what you define longevity as and living optimal. What that looks like in your world.
I think it's kind of taking that buzzword and turning it into the essence of what people are really after, which is increased health span. Right. And I think you kind of alluded to that, which is what you want the most out of the years, the most quality of the years that we have, not just now, that's just like living longer. Right. And I think for high performing professionals, entrepreneurs, executives, right, I think a lot of that is in the latter half of their life and their careers, that is enjoying the fruits of their labor. Right. And be that for the hobbies, right. Going out on the pickleball court, doing golf. Right. But also, I think a lot of us, they don't really, that are wired for high performance. It's not necessarily, I have this retirement and sit around and do nothing. Right. We still want that mental performance, that cognitive edge, the ability to kind of think, create. And so it's ensuring that we have that 10, 30 years left to continue to be able to do those things at the capacity and levels that we want to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I say I don't want them to drag me on the golf course at 100. Like I want to actually be able to go out, play some golf, and play decent. Hopefully break my age, and
not come back home with back pain, aches and pains, and popping Advil. Right?
Exactly. So talk to us about these high performers that you're speaking of, these executives, these entrepreneurs. Talk about the process. Like, what do you like from soup to nuts? Like, what are you doing to help them and that feel 20 years younger in the next 90 days?
Yeah. I mean, it all starts with unlocking kind of the current health status at a cellular level. You kind of talked a little bit in the introduction, cellular medicine, and it's really kind of starting to peel back the layers of the onion of what is happening underneath the surface, right? So like, why do we not feel like we're recovering and bouncing back? Or why do we have these nagging injuries that are a little bit longer? Or why do we wake up and still have this brain fog looming over our head despite trying to get 8 hours of sleep, right? And the answer sometimes can be overt, right? Which is you're not taking the time to unwind, or you're exposing yourself to blue light at night. But it could also be, the answer lies in hormones or micronutrient deficiencies or inflammation or dysbiosis, imbalance of good and bad bacteria in the gut, right? And that is different for every individual, right? And that's what we try to help unlock is what are those roadblockers for optimal cellular health for every individual, right? I very strongly believe that the human body has an innate capacity to heal itself when provided the right environment and the right tools. Yep. But you need to kind of know where to start that course. So it all starts with kind of doing an advanced set of deep dive diagnostics to understand how do we start then pulling together a treatment plan.
Got it. So doing blood work and then doing, obviously probably pages and pages, hundreds of things that you're looking at, right? Getting the answers to try to see what's the missing piece.
Blood work, it may be saliva, maybe urine, it may be stool, depending on what we're going for. And I think the important thing to highlight is it's not looking at this from the quote conventional norm, right? So, we're not trying to optimize for LabCorp's normal reference range of testosterone or estrogen or inflammation, right? So even when we get that information back, we're looking at it through the lens of what we want to be optimal. And a lot of times it's much higher or could be much lower than what is listed as the reference range on the labs.
Got it. And then are you doing gene testing as well?
Yeah, so here's my take on gene testing. I mean, I'll do it with patients if they really want to, but we kind of commonly have this phrase in the functional medicine world, which is, your genetics, load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. So a lot of times, just because you have these genes doesn't necessarily mean that they manifest epigenetically, right? So they may not, you may have the capacity to have these things, but it doesn't actually show up. And it may never show up if given the right modifiable factors in life. Now, one area where it kind of may be helpful, it's kind of a bit of a hot topic you hear is methylation, right? Gary Brecka and methylation pathways and helping detoxification and gene and DNA repair, things to that nature. And, I think that's fantastic. It brings an awareness to this approach of cellular functional medicine. But at the end of the day, the answer is you take methylated B vitamins, right? And by and large, most of what I'm prescribing in my custom, nutraceutical plans is going to be methylated B vitamins, right? So if you want to invest $500 in doing that gene test, go for it. But it's probably going to be included in the $10 supplement to have a methylated B vitamin. So that's kind of my general take on it. I'm not opposed to it, but I'd much rather see people invest dollars elsewhere, maybe on a metabolomics test, where you're able to look at upstream markers of what's causing metabolic dysfunction or mitochondrial dysfunction. And so I'd much rather kind of explore those areas, because that's showing like what is in your body today, but precursors to what can be tomorrow, not just genetics that may never be expressed.
Okay. And what'd you call that test?
A metabolomics test. I use a company called Theriome at our practice at VYVE Wellness. But the best way to kind of describe metabolomics is kind of upstream signaling markers, right? So we commonly think of A1C as the marker for diabetes, right? And maybe if you're adept and your practitioner's adept, they're using maybe a marker of fasting insulin to say, okay, the pancreas is working really hard to keep your blood sugar normal. Well, metabolomics is going to be another 2 or 3 steps upstream of that to give you markers of metabolism to say, hey, the body's really kind of starting to struggle here, and it's keeping your blood sugar and your bloodstream normal today, but it's working really hard to do that.
Yeah. I think it's hard, man, because, I feel like I'm in that world, the Gary Breckas of the world, the Hubermans. I mean, you see all this stuff, right? It's just inundated with videos. And then it's like, this guy's saying this gal's saying this person's saying this. And then you have the normal folks like myself, and probably most of our listeners. I don't know what the hell that even means, right? Like, I don't know these big words. I don't know the words that we need to use and what they're even saying, but they do a really good job of making me believe it, right? So I've done the gene testing on the Gary Brecka thing, the 10X Health, and then they get in a fight, and then now it's like they're all doing their separate stuff, and it's like, man, there's just not like a source where you just know this is exactly what you need to do. And hopefully that's what you're doing, man, because it's frustrating for a guy that follows this stuff and does want to live and have a great health span, like you said, and live well. I just don't know what you're supposed to do. And like, so that's why when the team reached out, like, let's have a podcast, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Because I want to dive deep into this stuff, man, and like get to the bottom of this for our listeners. Because if they're like me, they're seeing all these same people tell you to do this stuff. And at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, they're making money on the test. They're making money on the vitamins. They're making money on whatever, the blood work, all this stuff. And I'm like, is it really true? Or are we just doing it so they can make a bunch of money, which I'm fine with that, but just tell me where I need to go. So that's what I'm hopeful for today. You just tell our listeners and myself, we're successful people. We just want to live great lives. What should we be doing exactly?
Yeah. So let's take the foundational things aside that we kind of talked about earlier on. You said, well, what makes you successful, right? The ability to provide your body the environment for that innate healing capacity, right? Modifying stress, deep quality, restorative sleep, right? So like I am a fan of things like those wearables, right? If it starts to give you information to change behavior. Now, if that, I have to take mine off occasionally because it does the opposite.
Say it again.
Yeah. I mean, mine does the opposite, right? You get a couple bad nights sleep and then you get mad at your device.
Right.
And then you're like paranoid when you go to sleep. You're not going to get enough deep sleep. So, sometimes you can't be a slave to the smart device. But those foundational lifestyle factors, then we alluded to after we had the foundation built, it's then looking at every individual and finding out what strings do we need to start pulling at and what areas do we need to address for that unique individual. I think part of my job, to your point, is to actually be a bit of a coach, an advocate, and a filter for that noise out there, right? Yep. Which is that the right application or tool for you, right? Is that greens supplement actually needed for you? Maybe, maybe not, right? Depending on your micronutrient testing, right? Do you have already the right balance of amino acids and phytonutrients? And if the answer is yes, then I might say, based upon what I'm seeing in your system, that may not actually be a good tool, despite what you're seeing out there on social media and being kind of pushed there, right? So kind of working with a physician, a functional medicine, integrative, there's another kind of rabbit hole of words, right? Is it integrative, functional, cellular medicine, longevity medicine, but somebody who's adept at doing more deep dive blood work and analysis. From there, you can then kind of start customizing and pulling together tools to address the root cause. And that's really what we're after, is like, what is the root cause of dysfunction? And there are patterns, certainly, but there's a lot of individual variability and a lot of different things in life that feed into that. So it's making sure you find a partner you can work with to sort through that noise and kind of customize it and drive it in onto the individual in front of them, and let the numbers guide them into making a treatment plan, which may include optimizing your hormones, right? Especially as we kind of age, we know, especially in men, testosterone levels decline by 1% to 2% every year. Right. So between 40 and 50, right, there might be a natural 10% drop. Throw in microplastics into that picture, and that might be more like 3, 4, 5% decline. So it might mean that we need to address things like hormone levels. It might mean that we then need to modulate inflammation pathways. And that's where you might leverage and tap into some of those cool tech devices that we have at VYVE, or you can even do at home, right? So not everyone necessarily needs a red light panel, but if your inflammation levels are really high and you're having delayed recovery and muscle soreness, might be a fantastic tool, right? Yeah. On the flip side, we might be leveraging some peptide therapies. So
what is that? So talk about that for a second. So what is a peptide therapy? I
think peptide is kind of the foundation around cellular medicine, and where you are using small molecules, these sequences, small sequences of amino acids. Technically, they're less than 50 amino acids sequences, or shorter, that have the ability to modulate different cellular pathways within the body, right? So unpacking that, let's take the example of a peptide that everyone's familiar with, semaglutide, Ozempic, Wegovy, right? That's an example of a peptide. Now, glucagon-like one peptide produced by our intestinal cells. Our body already makes these and produces them. And it has a role kind of at a high level of coordinating and facilitating metabolism and optimizing metabolic pathways within the body. It helps your body process blood sugar better and utilize insulin better. It helps your body kind of process body fat and communicates with the hormones in the brain that regulate appetite. Right. So that's one example of a peptide. And there's different.
Like the weight loss control. Is that what you're talking about? That's the Ozempic? Is that what it's called?
Yep. Yeah. The Ozempics, the Wegovy, and the Mounjaro, Zepbounds of the world. Right. But on the flip side, there's other peptides that regulate other cellular pathways. Right. So you have that nagging back pain injury that kind of gets flared every once in a while when you go to the golf course. Right. Yeah. That might be a totally different peptide that you're kind of working with to reduce inflammation, injury, tissue repair. So there's kind of, I think, different buckets of peptides we can use to kind of facilitate kind of the cellular pathways within the body.
Yeah. And those, once you're on those, like, what's the long-term effect? Or maybe they don't know, they haven't been out long enough. Like, what's the long-term effect? And once you start, do you have to stay on it forever?
It kind of depends on the peptide and the condition and why you're using that peptide, right? In my world, a lot of times we're using them to tap into the body's healing capacity and then eventually kind of remove them. I think if you want to use the example of the GLP-1s, which I think here's kind of where you're probably going with that question, which is like, hey, once you start these things, do you need to be on them forever? My goal is always to get my patients back off of them. It's, can we help the body reset the cellular communication pathways to optimize metabolism and gradually pull that off, assuming you're doing the right lifestyle things that we talked about earlier, right? So you're doing resistance exercise training and building good quality lean muscle mass, right? You're getting adequate protein intake and good quality carbohydrate selection in the form of fiber-rich vegetables, right? These things aren't sexy, if you will, but like they're foundationals that need to happen so you don't end up needing to rely on these peptide tools, especially the GLP-1s, forever. So by and large, and in my practice, we're trying to wean patients back off them and get them off of them. And then other peptides you cycle, right? So sometimes I may cycle in and out. So, if you develop an overuse injury with your elbow, right, we may use a peptide to reduce inflammation and injury repair for a 90-day period. And then we pull that back off because you've done the physical therapy and the strengthening exercises and tweaked your golf swing. And so that you don't kind of re-injure that. So some of them are cycled. Now, if you have an individual with, let's say, an autoimmune condition, right? Let's say an inflammatory bowel, or there's a lot of inflammation going on in their gut. And we might use an immune regulating peptide for much longer periods of time, several years, until we kind of get that back under control. So again, you're hearing and seeing a theme of personalization to every patient, every person, and every story. Yeah,
and I think that's what's unique about that, right? Is, like I've got constant tailbone pain, right? Not like terrible, but I've done the x-rays, the MRIs, nothing, right? Other than just you're 47 years old and it is what it is. But it's like, I think having a personalized approach to that probably can make that better versus just living with it. Fair?
Absolutely. And again, it's like, what tools do we need to kind of support that, right? It might be a peptide, might be some infrared light therapy, might mean, we need to do some micronutrients to kind of help support your healing and health kind of repair. So it's, so there's commonalities, but every patient's gonna be a little bit different.
So talk about the red light therapy for a minute, because I did that for, and this is part of my own issue. Anybody that knows me, my attention span is pretty short, right? And so I like to see quick results, which doesn't happen. But so when would you actually, and will you actually feel different by using red light therapy? And again, I'm assuming it's different for everybody, right? But I did it for like 5 straight days where I'd sit there for like 25 minutes in the actual bed. I didn't feel one bit of difference in the tailbone or anything. Obviously, that's not fair. 5 days. So what would the process look like for that? And what is it actually doing to our body?
Yeah, so some of these tools need to stack over time, right? Which is, I have a very powerful infrared bed in our office, and I may only see kind of acute relief and benefit for somebody who may have like spasmed their back, right? Like they pulled a muscle, and that might be an instance where somebody actually walks out that day feeling a little better, right? But if you have a little more of a chronic injury, that might be one tool among many that you have to stack together, right? But in answer to your question, the infrared light. They're wavelengths of light that penetrate deeper under the skin into the cells, specifically the mitochondrial cells. They do a fantastic job of activating the cells that produce ATP or energy. And why is that important for injuries? Well, you need a lot of energy for the healing and repair regeneration process, right? So it's kind of bombarding these cells with light to facilitate supporting the energy production, right? They do also downregulate inflammatory pathways within the body, right? But if you have a chronic injury kind of going on, we might need to target and activate stronger repair mechanisms, right? I might need to be leveraging things like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which has the ability to activate your body's own innate stem cells, the cells that have the ability to regenerate and repair and signal tissues that we need to actually do repair and not just downregulate inflammation, which might be something that you need for a more chronic or long-term injury, right? You may be going down the route of, do we need to explore direct administration of things like platelet-rich plasma or stem cells themselves directly to those areas of injury, right? So hopefully kind of getting a landscape of idea of like the different tools now that we kind of pull together for every individual. Love red light, but to me, it's a little bit more of a supporting tool as we start layering in other things to facilitate that regeneration repair process for chronic nagging injuries like your tailbone.
Got it. That makes sense. So let's talk about, people that maybe they're listening to this that aren't going to go and spend thousands of dollars and all this money to, get all these tests done. Obviously you got sleep, you've got nutrition, you got exercise. So we know those three things are big. We know water intake is big, right? So those things are all free to do, right? You can do push-ups. You don't have to have a weight. You don't have to have a gym. But what are the basics? Besides those, is there anything else that we need to be doing? And then dive into, sorry, there's a bunch of questions in this question, but for me, like this perfection mentality of like, I feel like one of the things that holds me back from working out as much as I should, resistance-wise, is I don't know exactly what all I should be doing. Does it really matter? Can I just go to the gym and as long as I'm moving, pushing, pulling, doing something, is that okay?
I think a theme that we've kind of talked about is fundamentals, right? And I think you just highlighted the importance of fundamentals, especially in an area of exercise training, right? And the foundations are multi-joint movements, right? And you hit the nail on the head, right? Which is, the very first thing is, am I doing kind of the right exercise selection? And you can get really in the weeds on some of the exercise types and see something catch you on Instagram. This is the new best way to deadlift, right? But the thing is, like, you're doing a hinge exercise, right? And the importance is that you're going in there and doing it. And then from there, you can then figure out how do you structure the exercise plan based upon how many days you have to work out. Right? So one of the questions I have that I'll commonly ask with my patients is like, okay, like realistically, how many days do you have in the gym? All right. And they'll be like, oh, I can work out 4 days a week. And then I'll say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, are you kind of like 9 out of 10 committed to being 4 days a week? They're like, no, like 2 days a week. I was like, okay, all right. If you can tell me like you're 95% at 2 days a week, let's build out a plan for those 2 days a week. And that might look very different than somebody who can commit to the gym 4 days a week, but it does come down to the foundations of multi-joint movements, pushes, pulls, those sorts of things, not kind of doing some crazy exercise on a Bosu ball with your arms, right?
Right.
So it's, again, not so sexy foundational stuff, squats, deadlifts, pushes, rows, kind of pulls, those sorts of things. And then I think that the area where I see a lot of my patients miss the mark on that, which is they invested the time to go do the exercise, and then they miss the critical window of muscle rebuilding, right? So they just go about their day, and it's like 2 hours later before they eat and fuel their bodies, right? And part of the concept of exercise is like you're creating these little microfiber tears, right? You're kind of breaking down that muscle tissue to rebuild, right? You need the amino acids, from the protein to kind of build that back up. You need some good quality carbohydrates and that kind of break down into sugar to facilitate those amino acids in the protein to get taken back up by the muscle to rebuild and see progress over time, right? So is the consistency of showing up to the gym twice a week, every week and week out, right? The to your point, the kind of discipline and focus to do the same thing and see incremental progress, but don't miss the fundamentals of, okay, I spent time going to the gym and now it's time to refuel the body with enough protein and amino acids and quality carbs to rebuild that muscle. I see that missed very commonly. So that's kind of maybe one talking point on the exercise. You kind of asked maybe some other lifestyle things beyond getting sleep, which I think the benefit of sleep as it relates to a bigger conversation around circadian rhythms is important, right? Yep. And I do think this is one thing that, does get some attention in social media that I think there's a lot of credence to and doesn't cost a lot of money. And that is kind of living in harmony with the world around us and capturing circadian rhythms, right? So that first morning light exposure, right? I'm getting that. And spending time kind of grounded outside first in the morning. It's a 5-minute investment. Yeah. Yeah. And then on the flip side of the back end of the day, right? Doing the same thing in the back end of the day, going for a short 5-10 minute walk after dinner as the sun sets, right? Obviously that can be more challenging in some areas of the country than others. But again, now you're kind of getting signals and cues from the outside world and the light that, okay, it's dusk time, which then kind of starts, to kind of facilitate the processes in the pineal gland in the brain to start saying, okay, it's time to unwind. And just kind of living in that arc of the day has a pretty tremendous impact with a minimal investment of time, long as we're consistent with it.
Yeah. Talk about meditation, sauna use. How important is that?
That's that whole kind of stress modulation, kind of that cortisol regulation, right? That is so prevalent in entrepreneurs and high performers and executives, right? Like we're on if we don't create that space. So meditation is kind of a tough one for type A individuals, right? I'm guilty of it. Just making that time and space to do nothing is probably one of the most challenging things, right?
And it is.
I just want to constantly be on. So for myself, I found the only way to really make that work is I had to leverage some tech gadgets, whether that be there's a couple really fantastic ones out there. I'm not kind of supporting any one particular, but one that kind of comes to mind is one of the gadgets that you kind of put on your ears and it has kind of a light brain tap. They've kind of seen brain tapping out there, but that is a cool device that works on giving audio and visual feedback to kind of create these different states of either relaxation or even focus or calm or sleep. And so that was the way I kind of forced myself to take time to do that, because kind of sitting there doing a breath work activity, I'd get real restless and I couldn't get my brain to kind of quiet down long enough to get the benefit. So that could be a great tool for individuals who struggle with that same thing.
So sauna, meditation. How about the cold plunge? Talk to us about that, because obviously that's everywhere. Everybody that's on Instagram that follows anybody with health stuff, you hear that all the time. Is that truly legit?
Yeah, I mean, the literature is there to kind of support it, although there is some kind of controversy kind of coming out, whether, is there gender specific? Does it actually harm females or help females? I view contrast therapy in the context of this 80-20 concept that you alluded to before, which is, right, we only have so many hours in the day,
right?
And only so many resources to invest, right? If you were going to say, okay, you can spend $20,000 on a really good sauna in your home because you need the consistency to do it every, 5 days a week, day in and day out. And you're not likely to go to a franchise place to go do sauna every day because that's not realistic either. Right? I'd much rather you see take that $20,000 and invest it elsewhere to identify, maybe the fact that you have some cellular dysfunction or hormonal imbalances and address those first. I think you'll get a lot more leverage there.
More bang for the buck.
That's assuming you have all the other you haven't checked all the other boxes for some of the things that we talked about. So I'm definitely not anti cold plunging and sauna, but to me, they should be like on the bottom of the list of things that we're kind of thinking about to really leverage. Because if you're not getting 8 hours of sleep every night, I don't think your cold plunge is going to undo that.
That's a great point. Great point. Yeah, and if your nutrition sucks, it's not going to undo that. And if you're not exercising, it's not going to do that. You're not hydrated enough. But also, if we're not doing the blood work to know what the hell's going on inside my body, the sauna is not going to redirect it either, right?
Yeah. I mean, and if you're eating poor quality, processed foods, and you don't know about your methylation pathways, and you're not taking a methylated B complex, right? I don't care how much time you're spending in that sauna, right? You're just putting poor toxins in the body, trying to get your body to detox them. Just don't put toxins in the body in the first place.
So would you recommend, because that's second or third time you've talked about this methylated B complex, would you recommend, and this is really tough, so this is me saying this, not you as a physician, could everybody just take a methylated B complex and would that help?
I mean, if you're taking a good quality multivitamin, pick up the label, look at the back, chances are there's a methylated B complex in there, right? And I think by some estimates, somewhere between 20 to 30%, depending on what literature you look at, walk around with some sort of methylation defect in their genes of the population, right? So it's fairly prevalent, right? And so I think I just say my general advice to my patients is if you're investing the dollars and you're remembering to take it every day, get a good quality multi-nutrient that is just already has methylated B12, methylated folate, some of these activated forms of B vitamins, as opposed to taking one that doesn't have it. Okay.
And what about creatine? Talk about that.
It's a new hot topic that's been around for a long time. I can remember, as a high school athlete, my mom saying like, don't take creatine, you're going to blow your kidneys or something, right? We didn't know as much about that then, but creatine has a lot of fantastic properties to it. And I think one of the things that we know from years in the bodybuilding community is it's actually a cell hydrator. It helps facilitate cellular hydration, right? And we've talked a little bit about optimal cellular health. Well, part of that foundation of cellular health is hydration of the cell for it to work well. And creatine does a fantastic job there. Of course, we know then they can facilitate and translate towards building more lean muscle mass. Right? And we've already spoken a little bit about the importance of building lean muscle mass and how kind of that helps improve insulin sensitivity, metabolism. Its links to longevity and decreased risk for dementia. Its connections to building strong bones and preventing osteoporosis. Right. So, as an indirect correlate to being able to help build more lean muscle mass, if you're putting the time in the gym. Right. We talked about don't forget that protein after the gym. But if you're going to the gym, get that creatine in as well, right? I'll commonly have my patients dump in that 5 gram daily mark of creatine in with some electrolytes, maybe some branching amino acids when they get ready to head to the gym. When they're driving over to the gym, it's just an easy place to insert it so you're not forgetting it. You're going to the gym and you're driving to the gym, just toss it in there and make that part of the routine.
What if you're not going to the gym? Like yesterday, I took that and I take it not every day, but the days I try to remember, right? And so what if I do the creatine and I use like Element, the salts, and so put those two together. Does it matter? I mean, because I've also done some research and found that maybe it also helps with brain, right? The cognitive, staying strong cognitively. Is that true?
It is, and that's where it kind of make a ritual out of it, if you will, right? So if you don't go to the gym every day, not everybody works out every day. That was just me as an example of building a ritual time out of it. So, another place.
So it's still okay to take every day, regardless.
Yeah, I mean, you can use it as a daily supplement, and that's what I'll advocate for my patients, right? Sometimes, I'll ask my patients, are you a coffee drinker in the morning? If the answer is yes, a fantastic kind of plug-in ritual is okay after you do your morning coffee. I want you to do some electrolytes in your creatine, right? So that first bottle after your coffee, so if you have your coffee, load up your bottle of creatine and electrolytes at the same time you make your coffee, right? And take that to go. And like your kind of mental prompt is to work on cellular hydration after your coffee or your caffeine intake that morning.
Got it. That's awesome. Do you mind sharing kind of your process? If we follow you around every day, what are we going to find that you do day in and day out?
It's changed a little bit since I have a toddler in the world now.
Oh, yeah.
So I was never an early morning riser. I always did my workouts in the afternoon after work, but that totally got flipped on its head.
Yep.
So mornings are early, 5 o'clock wake up time. That's what I'll kind of start that kind of my routine with. So I kind of do my coffee, some ketone esters as well. We didn't really explore that, but these are kind of exogenous, meaning you can actually kind of take in liquid form kind of ketones to keep that intermittent fast going on a little longer and use that as a fuel source for your exercise, since I now have to exercise in the morning because it's my quiet time, protected time before the day starts and the toddler gets up at 7. So, if I'm cycling some peptides in, that's usually kind of getting the peptides kind of administered as I kind of prepare that coffee and ketone esters. And I might do 1 or 2 really important kind of outlining for the day of key things that needs to be done. I find that kind of helps me like mentally prepare for the day. And then I can actually go into my workout without like thinking through, oh, here's all the things I need to do. Right. It's I guess in a way, a form of meditation, journaling, which is kind of, I'm just not intentional breathing exercise meditation, but it's, taking that 5-10 minutes, just okay, here's what I need to accomplish for the day, or here's the stuff that needs to come off my schedule for the day. And then I can go in to my workout kind of very focused and kind of clear, and getting a good 45-minute workout. I usually make my split between 3 to 4 days strength, 3 to 4 days a week cardio, depending on what I'm trying to focus on at the time. But I'm kind of squeezing in a 45-minute workout in, structured, finishing up with a few yoga poses and stretches, trying to get some breath work in, and then off to the races for the day. Whether that's in the clinic, seeing the patients. I also have a software company where I support other clinics like mine. So kind of split my time, but I've prepped and made the food the night before. So, really trying to make sure that, keeping up with that nutrition, like I talked about, and practicing what I preach. So it's essential for me to pack, like pre-prepare meals and pack that ahead of time, so you don't fall into that rut of just ordering whatever DoorDash can get to you. And whatever's kind of hidden into that, even if you're trying to choose clean restaurants. And then it's get home and spend some good quality family time, right? Trying to make use of kind of that little 2 hour window before the day kind of starts to unwind. Blue light blocking glasses go on at night. When toddler goes down to bed, that's my mental visual cue. Throw those blue light blocking glasses on so I don't forget to do that every evening. Melatonin is probably a nightly routine for me as well, a little sublingual melatonin. So it kind of mimics the natural release peak and drop of melatonin that we should be getting. So that's a little bit of a day in the life.
Nice. I like that. Thank you for sharing. Tell our listeners about VYVE Wellness.
Yeah, VYVE's what I kind of describe an integrative regenerative cellular medicine clinic that specializes in a lot of different restorative modalities. And as we talked about today, we're kind of using a lot of our diagnostic testing to determine which modalities kind of get pulled together into a treatment plan for our patients. So creating a lot of personalized, customized treatment plans from hyperbaric oxygen, peptides, hormones, IV therapy, kind of whatever tool that I feel like needs to get pulled together to help naturally optimize somebody's health and wellness. And it's kind of a bit of an experiential place, kind of come and we have, kind of music and lighting and scents kind of, wrapped up in that environment to ensure that when you're kind of there, one of my main goals for VYVE for my patients beyond this cool cellular medicine we provide is you walk out feeling better than when you arrived. Right?
That's awesome.
And part of that could be from just the environment that we created, or the conversations that you had with the staff. So, there's the fantastic, cool kind of longevity or health span optimization medicine that we talked about, but then there's also just kind of this experience of just kind of creating a safe space for healing.
Yeah, I love it. Where do our listeners find more of you?
Best place is going to be YouTube or Instagram. Kind of hear a little bit more about what we're up to, see what we're up to, and then kind of that captures your attention. You want to learn more about kind of coming in and experiencing VYVE in person. Best place is the website vivewellness.com/get-started. There's a kind of a little bit of a discovery call process that we can kind of learn a little bit more about you and you to learn a little more about us.
I love it, man. Well, thanks so much for your time today. Hang with me here while I hit end, but thanks so much for being on the Circuit of Success.